loves. So today I thought we could share some time around truly safe boundaries, emotionally, energetically, psychically, around sexuality. So we're not really talking right now about physical boundaries. This is more some things to consider around how you're going to create and make discerning, good choices in terms of sexual intimacy and the boundaries that you set with people that you are considering that you're considering taking as a lover. So the first thing I want to mention is that I've already done a video on boundaries that's, I think, a little broader, and it's you can watch that. One of the concepts in there that applies to this is considering always that your boundaries are more importantly keeping you in than keeping other people out. So to always approach boundaries with a fundamental approach of, I'm going to create this boundary, this containment, to keep myself in, to keep myself more powerful, more full, more potent, not so much to keep other things out. And what that does is it creates the same boundaries on the surface, but from a different place, and that place will be less likely to elicit conflict or hurt feelings or, a power dynamic around boundaries. If you are not in reaction or push away from something outside of you, if you're more turned towards yourself and just holding that space, there's some kind of natural law in there that makes it easier to hold and makes it easier for other people to hear and respond, even if the boundary is the same, which it will be. There's a whole video about that somewhere on the YouTube channel. There are different things I wanted to visit today, though, some of which I've really been in a crash course on myself, which is why they feel really relevant to me right now. So the first one is, I want to talk about your nature, the female nature, and boundaries. So what I'm aware of is that in myself and in many women that I know, there's a way that as soon as someone is close enough to us, as soon as someone has kind of started opening up some of the doors and locks with the keys of intimacy and sexuality and passion and connection, we tend to be the same being, no matter who they are. Like, there's the sexual current in women, once it starts flowing, usually wants to upwell and adore. It wants to upwell and nourish. It wants to upwell and elicit and bring forward the best, the brightest, the jewels of whoever's in front of us. And why that is dangerous is that what I've experienced is that it's for me, it's like a natural state. It's the nature of me when I'm open. And so regardless of who is in front of me in some ways, whether or not they've proven themselves worthy of that level of adoration or that level of openness or that level of upwelling and nourishment, I want to give it. I'm open. It feels good to have it moving. It's its own beauty to live in that. But that can get me and maybe you into some pretty complicated situations, into situations where there's a lack of reciprocity, where we are in a state of love and openness and giving that isn't warranted yet, and therefore there becomes deficiency, there become imbalances and power dynamics, and all of a sudden the need to create a whole bunch of boundaries, right? So as soon as someone, what I'm talking about is that there is the boundary to be aware of is a lot maybe further out than what you think. That the boundaries, once somebody gets in close enough, starting to set boundaries gets really tricky because you may find yourself in conflict with your own nature. It's like ovulating and having your lover right next to you and not wanting to make love because you don't want to get pregnant. Like that intensity of but I really want to, and it feels like the right thing, but it's not right because it's not the right time or you're not the right person. There's a so better maybe not to get in bed together, right? Not even tempt that. So all I'm saying in a long way is that when I'm considering boundaries now, and I wonder how this might be for you, I really look at the outer boundary. I'm more and more sensitized to when someone's getting close to me, and if I feel a charge or if I feel a draw or an attraction, getting really conscious of that contact and really present at that boundary, knowing that that's the place to find out what the correct relationship is. Not when they're closer, because as soon as they're closer, there are a lot of other things that are going to start moving. Bonding, my own desires, my own fantasies. There's a lot that starts to happen. And then you're trying to navigate all these little, it can become almost like micromanaging. Different boundaries that are not really about what they're really about. You know, all these things that start to come up that seem to need to be negotiated, but that are really just about like, are we loving each other in a reciprocal way? Are we both holding this? Are we both worthy to be in a sexual space together and be holding this level of intimacy and vulnerability with each other? So what I want to offer first is that maybe consider holding boundaries as first like a membrane around you that wherever you feel that, wherever you notice that in any given exchange, that's the place to pause. It's okay to take time, and it's important to take time. If it's the right person for you to bring close to you, there is no rush, even if it's passionate. In fact, the longer that you can stay there and see what happens at that periphery, the better. And to save yourself from the deep inner conflict that can be created by bringing someone in too close too fast. And one of the reasons for bringing somebody in too close too fast, sometimes, we just think we're carried away by passion. What I've learned recently that's been humbling is that actually, no, the reason I've been bringing people in too close too fast is because I've been afraid of intimacy, and I haven't been willing to pause and go through one level of intimacy after the other and see what happens. Are we going to go deeper? Are you going to meet me? What is this going to feel like? What's true here? Okay. All right, now we go deeper. Because at every single one of those thresholds, there's true intimacy. And what it is to bring somebody in from the way outside in really fast is basically to rush through all these potential thresholds of intimacy, vulnerability, and power. So for one thing, taking the time and actually going through these thresholds, I think of them like gateways now. You know, it's like the right person for you is going to have the keys to open up the locks at all the different gates, but you got to pause there with them. There has to be this willingness to sit for a moment and to not bring them in really close because that feels safer and somehow more comforting, because in the end that doesn't work. Or to almost like help them along, or help yourself along. It's like if you're looking for something that's going to feel really stable and give you the kind of intimacy that you can relax into so that you can open to some real depth of experience and pleasure and just love and connection, then building this architecture, these thresholds are places where you're building something together, where you meet and something gets made, whether it's by talking or by an exchange of sexual intimacy or by who knows what, right? But there's slowing it down, paying attention, and being willing to be actually intimate is the invitation. And the side-by-side invitation with that is to become aware of if you, like me, had or have secret reasons for not actually wanting to experience intimacy, because it's so vulnerable and because it's so raw, and you just don't want to go there. Maybe you don't trust. Maybe it's scary. It is scary. So that's my invitation to you, first of all, is to watch how you are navigating boundaries from a place of whether or not you are honoring the journey and escorting a lover, especially one that you potentially could have a true, deep containment with and go on a beautiful walk with. Watch how you are escorting them closer and closer to you. Watch when you're pulling them in really close or pushing them far away. But that knowing that if you bring them in really close and they come into they're right here by your heart, they are going to start opening up these places in you that you don't want to be in conflict with. Inner conflict is one of the deepest, hardest things in intimacy, I would say, is that deep confusion of, I love you and you are so not the right person for me, right? When we get ourselves into these situations where we didn't let it happen and build itself to a true intimacy, and therefore we find ourselves with a lot of intensity and passion and bonding and what feels like love, and a lot of either distortion or disharmony or lack of reciprocity at the same time. And that creates a lot of tearing and a lot of just a contortion on the inside of our being that becomes very difficult and can be very painful and very hard to navigate out of. You know, the boundaries on the way in. What did somebody always said? It's always easier to say yes than it is to say no. It's always better to set stronger boundaries and say, okay, I think I can loosen that up a little bit, than it is to set weaker ones and try to push them back out. So that's one thing I would say. The other thing that's been, and obviously I'm looking towards some of the deeper things that might be going on inside of you that in the terrain of intimacy, the deeper energetics. You know, obviously there's a lot of ways to navigate boundaries that are not as metaphorical as this and not as felt. I'm speaking more from this deep feminine perspective of how are you going to feel your way through these opportunities that come to you? How are you going to feel your way into what's right for you? How are you going to advocate for yourself, and how are you going to steward what you carry? How are you going to steward the deeper nature of your essence, which is this fountain that just wants to pour out, like wants to so badly. It feels so good that it can sometimes hijack what's actually real and get you in a tricky situation. So, well, along the lines of that, actually, one of the things I wanted to mention was the piece around really noticing boundaries are in relationship to what's real. A lot of times when passion and bonding starts happening, especially if it's not quite deserved, especially if you don't quite have the foundation for it yet, what will happen is that, like, we will often see the potential of either the person or the relationship. We'll feel it. We'll see it. Like, we know where it could go. We're already opening. We know it could go forever. We know the potential. And what can happen is that, I'll speak for myself. What can happen is that I will see that potential and not hear what the person in front of me is actually saying, because I'm busy listening to their heart or the deeper thing, or maybe what they really mean, or what they feel, but they're not yet quite willing to express or acknowledge yet, or grow into. And then I'll attune to that and then wonder what the hell happened when nothing works out and there's no reciprocity, or there's agreements aren't kept, or all of a sudden I'm in a relationship or a situation that has nothing to do with my values. So one of the things to do is to really listen to what's being said and being shown, not what you're hoping for, or even what you see and feel. Sure, it's great to stay in touch with that, because that is part of a deep feminine gift, which is to elicit growth, to elicit soul from whoever's in front of her, right? Like that ability to see what's true about someone or to see what's possible. Don't let that go. At the same time, let your choices be from a place of listen to what whoever it is saying to you. If they're saying they're not ready for commitment, don't listen to the part of your heart that knows you're already committed. And that but wait, we're already in this, right? Listen to what came out of his or her mouth. I'm not ready. I don't want to walk this way with you. It's not time yet for me. You deserve better. All those things, when you hear them, just let them be and respond to them, even if it's hard. That would be my advice. And because sitting at the gate of what's true and what somebody is actually aware of inside of themselves is the only way to go deeper anyway. The fact of the matter is, even if that is just a moment, even if that is just them being afraid of intimacy or them not quite realizing how deep their feelings are for you, all these things that you might be seeing or sensing, unless you sit there together at that threshold, at that place of what is, it can't authentically open way. You can't skip over that. So, just, okay, well, this is what it is. Oh, you're not ready. Okay, well, you're not ready. Well, then my choices are, oh, you don't think you deserve me. You think I deserve better? Okay, maybe you're right. Just be with what is coming out of them and honor the person in front of you in that way. It'll keep things clearer, and it's a way of staying on what they are aware of as well as what you're aware of, and not getting lost in fantasy, and also not getting lost in just spiritual potential, or the soulful potential that may exist between the two of you, but that both of you have to very consciously choose in order to take anywhere. The final thing I would say in our little moment here together is don't withhold initiations. So a lot of the reasons why we won't set boundaries, a lot of the reasons why I have not set boundaries in the past is because essentially I was withholding consequences from the person that I was with. I loved them. I loved him. And I kept absorbing the consequences of his actions. So actions that would have authentically pushed me away, or that would have really actions that hurt and that were so out of alignment with my values that I would have left, or I would have taken space, or that there would have been consequences. There would have been the consequence of losing intimacy with me, losing the connection that we were sharing, and losing this thing that I loved to do, which was just to love. So I kept absorbing the consequences, meaning I wouldn't just give consequences, and not punishing, but just I wouldn't allow natural responses to happen. I stayed so invested in being close and making it work and understanding him and looking deeper and being compassionate and all these things that I was essentially consistently absorbing all the consequences of his actions. So our relationship began to be built on a non-reciprocal dynamic, and a dynamic that eventually failed, and that was challenging for both of us. And in the end, when I did finally give way and leave, what was happening was so out of alignment with my values and with what was okay for me. It was toxic for me, what was happening. So when I did finally, in this case, end our marriage and leave, it was like I had finally given him the actual consequences of his actual actions, and that was what woke him up. That was what made him realize that he wanted to be in the relationship fully, that made him realize my value, that sent him on, catalyzed him on a huge journey into his own manhood. That in a way I had withheld for that long because I hadn't been willing to give him the consequences of his actions. So in my experience, that is one way in which we don't allow ourselves to create boundaries, or to at least respond in an authentic way is we withhold consequences. We don't want someone to hurt, or we don't want to be alone, or whatever it is. But, you really don't have anything to offer other than what's true. And by what's true, that is a distilled something. That isn't, a punishing, blaming, shaming kind of push away. Consequences, it's like natural law, right? Cause and effect. So it's like if there's something happening that makes you want to withdraw, but you don't, or there's something happening that makes you want to take a step back and get centered and come forward with a different kind of choice. And if you don't let yourself do that, then you are withholding consequences that give the person in front of you an opportunity to come and meet you, to have the initiation that they need in intimacy. It's like giving them consequences doesn't mean, it's not the same thing as punishing, right? What it means is, hey, this is what's true. When you do that, I don't want to be intimate with you. When this and the other thing happens, my sense of attraction towards you and desire to really be, to make love to you and to open to you in that way just dissolves. So instead of kind of skipping over that to still be what you think a good relationship would look like, or to stay connected, to give your person actual feedback. That's what allows them to step up and show, are they the one that has the keys to the doors and your gates, so that as they're walking through, they're worthy. And it's right. It's good. This thing where we just expect that there's going to be instability and chaos and some amount of just power tripping or complication, a lot of that comes from the fact that we have just forgotten that we're a temple, and nobody enters the temple unless they've gone through multiple gateways first. They've made a journey. They've come to the door. They've been admitted. They've been purified. They've made an offering. They've maybe been purified again. They've sat and they've fasted. Then there are thresholds. Nobody gets to the center of the temple without showing again and again and again that that's where they want to be, and they're ready for what they're going to find on the inside. So, those are my thoughts. I'm happy to be sharing them with you and happy to be connected with you. I hope this was interesting, at the least, and that some of it either resonated with you or gave you maybe some different ways to think about some things that might be going on in your world. I know we're all facing a lot of decisions around intimacy a lot of the time, and my hope for all of us is that our decisions, our choices keep bringing us closer and closer to a sense of fullness and a sense of sacred intactness. That there are natural laws, there are ways of approach that change everything. And we can remember what they are. And if we're willing to walk with the natural laws of things and ask how our deeper feminine nature really opens and what she really wants, which often is passion, sure, but it's also to be able to open and continue to open. Not to open and then get all like thrown into chaos, or to open and then realize that, like, oh, that's not actually a sun, that's just like a fluorescent light bulb and it's going to turn off any minute. It's like there's a deep need, I've noticed in myself and in most women that I know, to just open and keep going, because our capacity for both pleasure and depth is unlimited. That's one of the gifts that female sexuality and the female being, the incarnated female body and form and energetics, subtle energetics bring, is a certain amount of endless unfolding depth. And that's what I wish for you, and for you to be able to share with whoever you choose, whoever's in front of you that you're choosing, that you are, that you have found worthy of your deepest gems. Blessed be.